time.
Oh,
Then you want to come back.
The hell?
No, this is why. Yeah, why? No, it's another one. It's another one coming. Yeah, they asked me about my role and I gave you about
hey, Scott,
Are we endorsing,
Scott,
are we endorsing vaping, smoking and otherwise,
would indicate there.
Yeah, I don't think that's better now.
this has to do
It's
with
tough.
party, right? Block party.
Breaking you into the nomenclature.
Oh, the Charles Holmes block party, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My suggestion is that you can pull out of there and vote on Saturday.
That I what?
That they can pull out of it and vote on Saturday.
How many of these we've done? Morning, evening.
Hey, Don. Hey, well, I don't have to share that with Danielle, do I?
You might want to. Walk right off this piece at all.
That's okay. Can you just email me?
I'll email.
Okay.
Okay.
You ate most of that cake last time. I didn't get that much of it.
I have to do
This doesn't even have the date on it.
cream cheese pie.
Oh, my God.
This is the, this is this, I think. Third Street, Broadwell and Third, maybe. But this doesn't actually have a date, it just says August. It's Saturday, August. Oh, okay.
All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get our study section called to order. It is 6:01 p.m. We can all stand for the pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a reminder, if you have a cell phone on you, please make sure that it is silent. City Clerk Domingo, if you take roll call for us, please.
Councilmember Williams. Reed. Jackson.
Here.
Lawler. Davis.
Present.
French.
Here.
And Mayor Spencer.
Here. So to begin our study session, we do have a couple of gentlemen here that are to present on the affordable housing opportunities that we have. So at this time, I will call you both up and the floor is yours.
Before we get started on the presentation, I just want to provide council with a little background on how we kind of got to this point. So they have met with the Albion Building Authority, ABA. The ABA has been kind of discussing on what to do with the Maple Grove facility. They had a facility assessment done right before the pandemic. At that time, we know it came back to saying we need just about $3 million worth of improvements. Now it's been a few years later, and obviously with everything, those costs probably have drastically increased. So we just the board started exploring different options, and that's how we ended up meeting with the Affordable Housing Advisor. So they will go ahead and share a little bit about what they do, and then we can go from there.
My name is Gershon. People call me Gus, and this is my partner.
I'm Jackson, and it's nice to meet you all. We appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you. And I think a good place to start would maybe Gus can give you a little background on Affordable Housing Advisors. I can drill into our work with city governments and nonprofits, and then we can either take the floor from questions or dig into the analysis we provided for Maple Grove Apartments.
Thanks. I will be brief to indulge you with brevity and not being too wordy. So if there's any questions at any time, we are advisors and brokers. We have no shortage of capacity to speak. I'm doing it for your benefit. So if I leave out any details you'd want to hear, just ask me, because I'm going to try. Our firm was founded in Michigan by a gentleman, Paul Davis, who was an attorney in Metro Detroit, and he began prior to 1987. Our actual firm began in 1987, and what we've done for the last 36 years has served as advisors to nonprofits from all backgrounds, which we include in that: government entities, housing authorities, housing commissions, city and state governments. What we do is provide analysis work, educational work for on behalf of those entities. We also work for for-profit entities, and we provide information that allows them to make decisions as to the best manner to continue the preservation of their HUD subsidized apartments. It's a very large umbrella, HUD subsidized housing, and in this case, apartments. It breaks down into many components. Two of the biggest components are the project-based Section 8 program, which is also within or under that are also voucher programs and other Section 8 programs, and also the low-income housing tax credit program, also known as LIHTC. We are the largest broker. We sell and have sold for 36 years HUD subsidized apartments as a part of our business. It's how we have made our brand. We work coast to coast in all 50 states. We have 3 offices, and it's all we do is act as advisors and brokers of HUD subsidized apartments. We're headquartered where we were founded in Southfield, Michigan. We've worked close by with some entities that are very familiar to you. The city of Marshall is a current client. Originally it was a Kiwanis Club in Eaton Rapids, is a very recent past client in the last few years. And we worked with the state of Michigan. MISHDA has been a client for 16 years. So a lot of entities that you know, and larger and small nonprofits from all backgrounds. We were engaged, if you would. It happens to be a free service to take a close look, and what we do is an analysis of the Maple Grove apartments to kind of give our analysis not as a means of understanding the value of the apartments and whether the apartments could be sold if there was a market of buyers. And in the world that we work in and what we explore, everything is based upon long-term preservation. So whether we're selling in Albion, Michigan, or in Colorado Springs, everything we do is basically selling from a current owner to a long-term preservationist. That brought us to meet with some other boards here, some other individuals, as Jack mentioned, within your government here in Albion. And we've kind of concluded we're here on a public forum, is my understanding. And so any specific information we are glad to share with you. And we've been asked, if there's a saleability, is there ability to preserve this asset through the sale of the asset to a long-term preservationist? We said there is. We identified the market. We have gone through and are glad to do that again. The valuation, which kind of discusses components of the property, what you have, what makes it unique, and what course you could take if you wanted to explore a sale. So that's what we do, and that's what we've done here so far. So that's our purpose today.
And I'll expand a little bit more on our work with nonprofits. In 2010, we began what we call our nonprofit education initiative, which is the goal of providing city governments and nonprofits with an accurate value of their current existing HUD subsidized properties. It's a bit of an unknown fact, but around half the affordable housing in the country is owned by what HUD would designate a nonprofit, which includes city governments. And when in 2010, HUD released a memo stating that nonprofits could capitalize off the sale of their properties. So affordable housing advisors, starting in 1987, we'd never really focused on nonprofits much because they never sold their properties. And if they did, the sales proceeds would go right to HUD. But this memo comes out, we began getting calls from city governments, nonprofits. Hey, we Googled affordable housing sale, affordable housing brokers. Your name came up. Can you tell us what the value of our real estate is? So almost overnight, we got into the nonprofit business. Since then, as Gershon mentioned, represented nonprofits coast to coast, city governments like the city of Marshall, like MISHDA. We just wrapped up work for the Housing Authority of the city of Beaumont, Texas, Davenport, Iowa. So it's a very active part of our business. We're very proud to do it. And we can, go from there discussing more of our work with cities. We included the summary for Marshall House Apartments, which is the property we're currently selling for the city of Marshall, Michigan. We also included on the packet Countryside Townhouses of Kentwood, which is a property we're currently selling in Kentwood, Michigan, outside of Grand Rapids for a private for-profit client. So any questions you have, we can move forward.
Can you both elaborate on the HUD designations, that remaining HUD house? And can you provide a little bit more info if we do decide to go this route on what that means for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to?
I'll take Haley. First, I want you to travel with us because you're making our job easier by asking poignant and good questions. So thank you. If a group, for instance, with Marshall House, which is in the process of it's public information, so I'm not, giving any information that's not available, and similar to this situation, it was public and its characterization and on video and the whole, purpose of transparency. When a property sold like Marshall House, like Maple Grove, it's going to be sold to someone that the seller selects. Our process allows us to give you a very good look at the market of buyers. We are able to do that without disturbing the property, and frankly, without even any site visits to the property, through a platform that we've created and evolved over 36 years. There eventually is visits to the property, but it's not the primary substantive component of our initial marketing. All of those buyers are preservationists. So no matter who you choose or don't choose, if you were to explore selling further, all of them are committed preservationists, will commit with HUD, the federal government, for long-term preservation. Most of them will seek tax credit, renovation, acquisition, rehab, we say in the industry. They'll seek tax credits after acquiring the asset. They'll begin the process immediately, and they'll do that, and they'll enter into a longer term, probably 25-year additional restricted period where the asset needs to remain affordable. The value to the marketplace happens to line up with what is the objective of, fortunately, most nonprofits, most government entities, which is to continue, maintain, and improve the affordable living and the quality of life for the current tenants and the future tenants. That is a certainty. Most of the buyers, some of whom are nonprofits themselves, would commit to 50 years because their entire business model is based on preservation and working with the federal government within, what they call the program. So it's a big commitment from the buyer. It's a commitment from HUD. HUD ultimately is the slowest part of the process, actually. They have to approve the transfer of the HAP contract and any other transfer of property. So they're making certain that it's important to HUD, thankfully, to also preserve affordable housing. But that is, it would take you from your current restriction period to, probably 25 years beyond that, if not more.
Yes, when is the current restricted period ending?
The current restricted period would end in 2030. If the property were to sell, which it obviously can't, but if it were to sell today, a new buyer would sign a 20-year use agreement. And there would be 7 additional years remaining on the old use agreement, and that would be tacked on to the new use agreement that's signed. So
So it wouldn't start until after 2030.
It would be tacked on such that the new buyer would sign a new agreement
Right.
with a 27-year restriction.
it would remain affordable until 2040.
Okay.
With an opportunity to renew under the program in 2040, which is 2050.
2050, right?
Not mathematicians, but yeah, everyone stays in the program that's in the marketplace because it's frankly more lucrative for them as well to deal with the federal government also paying the rent.
The value of this property is in the HAP contract. That's why it would attract a national pool of investors.
Councilman Fred.
So the advantage of working with you or selling this property is it gets the city government out of property ownership. It puts the burden of restoration renovation on somebody else other than ourselves.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a win-win though. We find that you win because you also get some sale proceeds, which is what that notice Jack referenced.
Yeah.
2010-11, it allowed for groups to take the proceeds instead of being swept by HUD, that they were taking the proceeds. It allows for the new buyer to go through a tax credit program, which allows him or her to renovate the property really extensively, systems, units, kitchens, bathrooms, roofs, windows, everything that can get through the tax credit program, which is it's intended to give a 15-year life. And then the third benefit is to the tenants because they get that, and then future tenants get that opportunity. So that is one of the advantages if those are deemed an advantage, correct?
Yes, Councilwoman Davis.
Yes, with the tenants in mind. How are they impacted in terms of if all of these renovations are going to occur? Who picks up that? Will it be on the tenant's responsibility in terms of increase in
The
see
financial.
what I mean? The
I do,
financial
yeah.
part of it. How
That's
is
a good
that?
question. There's one thing that can happen to the rents. 100% project based Section 8. So the one thing that could happen, I'm not being jest, it's interesting because HUD assets are so unique. And when I began the industry, I learned these things. It's possible their rents actually could go down. The rents could not go up. The overall rent will go up. But the portion paid by the tenant will never go up. That's part of the protective mechanisms of a HUD and the tax credit program. HUD will pay more to the new owner after the renovation, and depending on variables in a rent comparable study, that may go up significantly, but it won't ever have a negative impact on the tenants. They'll pay because it's really based on their AGI, their adjusted gross income. And that doesn't change. So their AGI stays the same, then it's the same. If their AGI goes down, it goes down. So
they're not out in the cold.
No.
no, not at all. No, they wouldn't be out in the cold and.
Well,
in
they
fact,
might be for while the renovations are happening.
I mean,
I thought that's what Ms. Davis was asking. Actually, it's interesting. In the HUD world, there's something called in-place renovations, which is also quite unique. It's no matter how they cut it, no matter how well the owners do, because they do a really fantastic job, it's still less linear and less convenient for the owner, but they will wait for units to go vacant is one method.
Mhm.
When a unit becomes vacant, renovate it, put a new tenant in, or move a tenant to that vacated unit. Otherwise, they'll create a mechanism where tenants are moved to a community room or to something offsite where they're shuttled for an enjoyable day and they do spas and different things that can be beneficial to the tenants. And during that day, they get a new kitchen and they come back. And then a few days later, they're taken out, they're given some other incentive, and something that's positive. And they come back and have a new bathroom. So it's quite, because in the market rate world, that doesn't exist and it
Okay.
probably will never exist.
And I was speaking of both.
Okay, good, yeah,
Increase
yeah.
as well as convenience or inconvenience.
Yes, okay, so. With the sale of the property and the potential new owner, potential seller of the property and potential new owner. The new owner would have to file for that extension for the tax credit, right? Do they come to us for the tax credit or do they go to HUD? So currently it's a light tech, right? So would they extend the light tech? And I guess that would be partly attributed to us as well,
Right,
right?
there's no tax credits currently on the property, so they would apply with the state and with HUD for an allocation of tax credits. It would not come from the city.
Okay,
The only discussion on that, because it's a really good question, and that's being worked out with the Marshall sale and other sales that we make on behalf of Mishta. The only issue is property taxes. The current group is exempt from property taxes. The new owner could be a nonprofit, may not be. They may, as part of the negotiation, they may look to the city to say, is there an exemption available? Is there a pilot available? Is there some type of relief, or maybe not? Just that's one of the more, it just happens to be unique to being also the taxing board, if you would, as a city. That's the only, but the tax credit, as Jack says, through Mishta, which is really administering it for HUD.
okay.
And pilot is payment in lieu of taxes, correct?
Yes, sir, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. How'd you guys end up here today? Did you guys just saw the property or were you contacted?
I think years ago, I spoke to Haley's predecessor, maybe. As part of our job, Jack's job, my job, and we do contact owners of HUD subsidized apartments. Our department only contacts nonprofits. And what we ask is, do you want to know the value of your property and alternatives? And that's it. So that's how we reached out and the city was responsible.
Okay, yeah, the reason I asked, because I thought you guys were here to talk about purchasing the product, the product.
But that's also a really good point. We would say, if the team here, if the city ultimately decided ever to explore and really get serious about selling. We're the largest and we're Michigan born and bred, and we love business in Michigan. It's because we sell in all 50 states. We're the largest in all 50 states. And we're the first to do it. So it's not that we're so special, but we work very hard with a Detroit kind of mentality. And we have done it the longest. So we're the largest in all 50 states, but we love to work in Michigan because it's something we can, very tangible for us. The last thing you want to do, whether you hire us or another group, there's a few other groups around the country. The last thing you want to do is sell to a direct buyer without an intermediary, because they're not in it to advantage sellers. And there are plenty of direct buyers, but we always tell groups, nonprofit or for profit, that's the last thing. But we don't buy, we don't manage, we try to have zero conflicts. We don't invest in, we don't have any relationship with HUD subsidized part of housing, other than we're advisors and we're brokers.
Gotcha.
So the property that's in Marshall, this was also city-owned property?
It's still owned by the city, yes.
Oh, okay. But they're contracted with you all to try to find a buyer for the property, correct?
Yeah, they've gone through most of that process. And they are in the the throes of that, already negotiated with a buyer. And already have entered a contract with the buyer. And they chose actually a foundation, which is by itself a nonprofit. And it's in process to approach a closing, I'm sure, in 24. It's not the fastest process, not like buying a house because HUD's involved. But yes, they've gone through that process and they had looked at 8 or 12 buyers, maybe 10 or 12 buyers for their property. They interviewed them, they had in-person interviews. You can always do video interviews, and they made a selection based on who they thought fit with what they're looking for, because it's more than money. Our objective as a team, affordable housing advisors, we believe we can get nonprofits. We believe we can get them the best price and the best buyer. And the best buyer has nothing to do with dollars, right? It's how they're gonna interact and treat your tenants, what track record they have caring for tenants, what track record they have owning properties that nonprofits have owned prior. And we try to bring all that in a very easily understood and apples to apples comparison throughout our process.
And so with Marshall House, this is very similar designation as to our Maple Grove, correct, in regard to the tenants who are eligible to reside within the facility.
So it is quite similar. It's 100% project based. They're both elderly designated. There are some folks that can live in both properties under HUD law. It's called the 202-811. But these are the same property types. It could be some disabled folks that aren't of the elderly age designation. But it's primarily an elderly property, 100% project-based Section 8. It really couldn't be more similar in regards to the HUD world. Happens to be it's close by. But actually, if we were in North Carolina and you were in Michigan, we would be showing you the same comparable asset because it's so current and it's one that we're working on. Beaumont, Texas, I believe was also a HUD 202, correct? That the city of Beaumont, Texas just happens to be a city that we work for. Also, it would be normal that only nonprofits could initially and originally develop what's under the 202 program. HUD has a lot of numbers and they all correspond to something, and this 202 program was a nonprofit design program for nonprofits to develop affordable housing. So yes, Marshall's extremely similar.
Do we have any other questions for either of the gentlemen before us? Okay, well, we appreciate this information, the packet that you gave us. You know, I'm sure we'll follow up with our city manager in regards to if this is something that council would like to move forward with.
Okay,
And
great.
before you go, just the next, can you speak on the next step? So if this is the route that we,
Yeah.
or the council decides to take, what would be the next step?
So we included in there a sample representation agreement. You should look that over, have the lawyers look over that, and if it's a next step that the city would like to take, we would execute that representation agreement and then begin the marketing of the property, which would include professional photographs, that sort of thing. But the signing of the representation agreement would be the next formal step.
I need to say it because I'm part of our team that created this is really important to our current managing director, who's someone that I've known for 25 years. We have never been paid on an asset if it doesn't sell, close, and is funded. So just unlike some realtors, which I'm saying they're in a positive light, just a different industry, we don't have performance language. We brought you 6 offers. How could you tell us if you choose not to sell throughout our process for any reason? We're in open transparency. That's how it goes. Like we don't have that. We either sell, the city's funded and we're paid at closing, or we meet you and we continue serving you for years to come. That's our objective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you have a good trip back.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
In comparison to the last.
Oh, thanks again.
Yeah. So that was perfect timing. That gives us a little bit of time to still go through some of the regular agenda items. So I just kind of go down the list. We are going to be asked to approve the appointment of Juanita Solicitor for the Arts and Commissions Committee or Commission. Do you have any questions about Juanita's appointment? Next would be to approve resolution 2023-17 to purchase 312 Fifth Street. That was a discussion that we had previously at council.
Since that time, I gathered new information on this, and I would like to have a discussion on these two pieces of property for discussion purposes, as well as a possible 2-week grace period delay to gather and compile more information, because I found out more from of the intended use of the property, as well as some options that we may consider as a council.
So is that something you want to discuss now, or?
I think we should discuss it now.
You want to do it?
I think we should discuss it now. We got
Yeah,
a
we got a
lot, we got a
lot.
large agenda.
Yeah.
So anything we can discuss and work on.
Well, where this really has come from, I listened to Mr. Ott last week, as well as I had the opportunity to attend a property management program or a seminar in Battle Creek. And they gave guidelines and an outline regarding some of the things the intended property and the purpose and things like that. And one of the things that they recommended for small business development, which this is development, a development team. And I remember when Mr. Ott came to talk with us, I don't think that has happened in terms of everything from financial institution. How is it going to? It gives us a strategy or the guidelines in which what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, and the impact it has on the city. And on the development team, there is things like the general contractor, public participation. And when I talked with him, he has gotten some public participation, but it hasn't been reported in a logical format in terms of presenting it as an option. And I understand that there may be some options as well in terms of special permit versus a zoning option, or special permit for 1 lot versus zoning of 2 lots. So I would just like to, as a representative of Precinct 5, I want to make sure he has, and I use her word, due diligence from the council in terms of we're doing everything we can do to help his small business as well as the city. If there are other lots that we can consider, and then it will be a win-win situation. Council may feel, no, we don't want a win-win situation because these are the circumstances that we're dealing with. But I just would like to discuss and share possibilities for a win-win situation for Mr. Ott as well as for the city in terms of building the new home.
Mayor Pro Tem Jackson.
So when you speak of our due diligence, are we talking about both lots, 310 and 312?
We're talking about options for
Options.
310 and 312.
Okay, options for 310 and 312. Next question, we're good to go to our city manager. So I see you have 310 and 312 on there, and you also spoke of what you would like to do with the property. So with that being brought on the table, what could you give me? What could you tell me about? I know you say you really need this property, but what would be our due diligence if we held off that long?
So to hold off, it took about 5 to 6 months for us to get the environmental testing results for these 2 properties. We started that back last fall. Our grant through MISTA to build this, we were awarded at the end of 2022. We are supposed to complete this project by August of 2024. My fear is if we continue to delay to try to identify new property for this, it's not good. It's not a quick turnaround when you do environmental testing. If we're unable to meet the requirements there are certain check marks with MISTA. That right now we're at secure location and identify a model for that property. Next would be construction. My fear is if we're unable to make those check marks, if we're not granted an extension of some sort, we could possibly be hurting ourselves from obtaining additional funding through MISTA, hurting other future grant opportunities. I just posed this question: what is the priority of Cullinan? I know in our comprehensive master plan, we want to see new housing. I think this entire year we've heard housing, housing, housing. We need new housing. So here we are bringing to you 2 parcels that have clean environmental results. We've been awarded a grant to build a new house on one of these properties. If we want to delay, obviously I will take the direction that council decides, but my recommendation is we move forward with purchasing these 2 properties. If you want to hold, if you're not interested in buying one property, I think it's great to allow him time to do that, but that would need to then be presented to the land bank because they will be the property owners. So they would still have to make that determination.
My idea isn't to put on hold. I think everything can be done that what we're thinking of in terms of getting new information or saying, no, we can't do this within a 2-week period, or to ask for a 2-week grace period from now until September 4th. I think that's our next meeting in September 5th. Okay. Until then, during that time, we can look at the option. We can look at there are no other properties available. I can say I want 1 property versus 2 pieces of property, but here are ideas for the second piece of property, which fits into the residential requirement. So just, to let our citizens know that we're doing everything we possibly can to make this a win-win situation. If it can't, I understand. That's all. But I was just saying delay it for 2 weeks to give more evidence or more substantial strategies that can be brought to the council in terms of this is what can be done and this is how we're going to do it. This is what the cost is going to be, and this is how the community will progress or will benefit from the 2 weeks from the property. I mean, just an idea.
Councilman French.
Thank you, Mayor. So we heard from Ian a couple of weeks ago and a month ago and 5 months ago about the process of identifying properties upon which we could build houses. And Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did at least 5, 6, 10 environmental studies.
I think it was closer to 5.
Yeah, so 5 or 6 properties that were eligible, that were owned by the land bank that we could use for housing, and only 2 were found. So if we were to start that process over again from a timeline point of view, and we found, say, 10 more, we add 5 months to get the testing done for those 5 properties. If 2 are found or 1 is found, then we start this process again, and we can't possibly get a house built in the remaining 7 months. So we've been aware of this for a while. And so I think that as much as we look for win-wins whenever we can, this is an opportunity where we've looked for win-wins, and this is the win-win for housing. So if we're going to win-win for housing, this is it. And we lose, and having gotten grants before, you don't want to aggravate the funder if you renege on a grant. So I would just say, this was brought to us 2 weeks ago. We approved it. This is now the second step. So we're moving on.
I would add, we also would need to identify funding to pay for those environmental. So the 5 to 6 testing that were done, we worked with the land bank. They use remaining grant dollars to pay for those. I would have to check with Krista to see what is available, or we would be covering the costs to have the additional testing done.
Well, it is a no-brainer for me. I hear what you're saying.
I'm here.
Oh.
To there, to there.
All right,
the back.
thank you, guys. Okay, thank you, Mr. French, Dr. French. I think that was an oversimplification of what we have going on here. And I say that because there may have been some information that is out there and I want to, through conversation, make sure that it's accurate. The land bank, I believe it was either the land bank or the EDC, sent out emails with properties that had already been tested and passed.
EDC.
And these two properties weren't the only two. Now, I have a question in this though. Those two properties were for two homes, right?
Yes, the
Okay.
ones that we're talking about today.
Yes, okay,
But one will be for one home. And then the hopes is to, once we get is it 310 built, we would apply for the next round of MISTA funding with the intent to build the next one at 312.
okay. And then we also have a row of homes that we plan on building, the same Mr. Mod homes off of Pine Street, correct?
We did. Unfortunately, we were not awarded that grant.
Okay, so we didn't get that grant. Was the testing already completed on that site?
No, we do know there has been some testing, but it's outdated, so we would need to have new testing done.
Okay,
It is owned, that property is owned by the Brownfield Authority.
okay, now, okay. I believe there's properties that have already been tested that we could look at for the other site that we aren't currently using. I know Mr. I specifically spoke to the 310 property, I believe it was, and his interest in the 310 property. Being that we only have one home to build, why don't we look at the 312 property for that development? If for now or over the course of the week and a half, 2 weeks. And let me also point this out. The conversation of Mr. I purchasing this property had to come to a head, and unfortunately, it came to a head because we have interest in those properties, the city, right? Okay, had that not taken place, he'd still be looking for help or assistance with trying to resolve these issues. If you don't mind, can we have Ian come up to the front?
Yeah, that's what I want.
Just so I can run a quick question, Mike.
We have.
Yeah,
Okay, not to go too deep into it because I am on the land bank. Conversations between me and Krista sometimes are. I don't want to speak them all over. But, you know, I have been talking with her about that because I've been talking with Mr. Ott ever since he came before about that piece of property that he wanted to purchase. And she says that it is possible to do what do you call it? Rezoning and get that piece of property for that. Talk with Mr. Ott about putting up really nice security divisions between property. Talk to Ian, he and I took a couple of rides and looked at some property that would be more on the. I can see this. I mean, you know, I went up there. When I want to know something, I do like Cheryl. She used to get her boots on and go get down in the hole with the guys with water problems, you know, and things like that. I put on my boots and I went up there and I was just taking a look at what it is. And you have to go looking for that street. I mean, it's not one that you're just going to automatically drive down and see. And you know, I was thinking about if there was a property that was, you know, I looked at something that was better visual. So people come by and they say, oh, gee, isn't that a really nice house, you know? And the city of Albion, you know, had that house put up for the people and things like that. But I am still under the thought that if we can do something that can help somebody who has helped the city, then we should do that. If we can't, that's a whole different matter. But since there are properties around here that are vacant, and I know that the land bank has applied for more money to test property. So, you know, I'm sure that they would not mind assisting us in that, but anyway.
So Ian, you were asked to come up to kind of give some
He's
insight.
gonna
well, I actually have a
want to
question
see,
for you.
want to see if it's the same
Specific.
question.
As far as the zoning for that property,
Which one?
if, the
310.
310 property, if the land bank were okay with selling the property, do you know if the zoning committee would be okay with pursuing zoning that was favorable for the new landowner?
I totally can't comment on how I think the planning commission might vote.
Yeah.
I think that there is an argument to be made for rezoning that parcel and that the property owner or if our ordinance allows for council or the property owner to take action on that, I think that's something that they could take to the planning commission. But in terms of inferring how the 9 of them might vote, I wouldn't play at it.
Got you. Now, timetable wise, just to get a vote on that, how long you think it would take?
That again, I don't mean to be, I think it's important to clarify that can be a moving target. That could be a moving target because of the materials required to submit a rezoning request, depending on how long an applicant would take to assemble those.
Okay, perfect.
Attorney Hartman.
Just so council understands, and Ian can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little bit of a catch-22 in that you can't rezone a property or seek rezoning of a property unless you're the owner. So he would have to own it before he could seek rezoning, and there's no guarantee that the planning commission is going to authorize rezoning. And so hypothetically, he could acquire the property and then not be able to use it for the purpose that he wants it because the planning commission won't do it. So there's going to be an inherent risk no matter what.
Right, right.
Councilman Brown.
So to avoid all of that time delay, given what City Manager Snyder just told us, is it possible to move forward on sale 12? So we don't lose out on the grant, get the house built, and then delay the decision on 310 until we have more information. Does that work?
It makes sense to me.
From a granting, that'll work?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem.
I don't have a problem with that.
Councilman Davis.
And, of course, I don't want to do anything that is going to jeopardize the funding sources, that jeopardize future building and things like that. I just want a win-win situation. That's the counselor in me. I'm sorry. So I'm thinking, if we can do this, if we can split it up, split the votes up in terms of taking action, because Mr. Ott only wanted one lot anyway, right? So if the council is willing to do that and maybe delay, okay, so we're talking about 112 or 312. 312 or 310.
We're going to approve 312, so they can build
312.
a house, but 310 is the property Mr. Ott wants, correct?
I
So
would recommend if you want to delay, then when you go to approve the agenda, I would just remove.
310
310,
Just
okay.
take that off of the agenda
Table
and
table, right?
or approve the agenda either way. I mean, you can do it either way.
If we table this one, it will take it off from the taking action right
Right,
now.
correct.
So he will have time will give us a little time.
Then I think also in the interim, we need to make sure that we have the parameters of what the planning commission would look at in regards to possibly approving that. Because like Ian said, it's a catch-22 because the planning commission's a different
Right,
governing board. They
Right.
have their own way of figuring things out for the
Right.
city of Albion, and that's their responsibility.
right.
So we all need to know, and Mr. Ott needs to know, what are the parameters that they'll look at?
Right, but it buys a little time to get us a consistent plan together to be presented to the planning commission.
The land bank.
but the land.
Or land bank, whichever one that you're supposed to do.
So that's the big, sorry.
Yep.
The big unknown is that the land bank gets resources from places that have requirements on how those properties are to be used.
Mhm.
And so we can't violate their granting rules for funding to
Right.
take over those properties. And if the rule is land bank has to have a clear and present plan, or if it's zoned residential, it has to stay residential, will the land bank sell it to Mr. Ott before the zoning has been approved? And so again, it just comes around to these catch-22s.
Right, and as long as we don't have a time frame in which we don't have another house. We only have the one. So we build the one and.
We still have.
So, and that's what I mean when I say the catch-22, and that it's my understanding that the land bank won't sell the property to Mr. Ott. Because the use that he's seeking to have would not be consistent with the current zoning. But he can't seek to rezone that property until he owns it. So therein lies the problem.
Unless the land bank does the application for a rezoning.
Correct, but that would, I mean, that's up to land.
Or what if, can the city
We don't-
request special permission?
We don't have any,
Authority with
we're
that.
not a property owner in there, so we can't. We
So
wouldn't,
Mr. Ott would have to seek special permission.
no, the land bank.
The land bank would have to.
They're the only ones that can really
Yeah.
seek the change there.
So
Okay.
it sounds like we have a conversation.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
you know, after today, like we said, we'll remove the 310 property from the agenda.
Mhm,
We will get the
Okay.
information necessary to come back
mhm.
in 2 weeks to figure out if this is even possible. To Mr. Ott.
Precisely.
At least we're, like you said, we're doing our due diligence.
We're doing our due diligence, and we want a win-win as close as we can get it. Okay, thank you.
Since we only have about 10 minutes left and I still need to get public comments in. I think that the biggest items again coming up will be the 3 items for the loan resolution. So if city manager Snag can kind of talk us through those 3 pieces that we're going to be asked to approve. That way we can get some quick questions in before we open up the public comment.
Yeah, so as council is aware, we're getting ready to kick off an $18 million wastewater treatment plant upgrades project. So included in your packet are the formal resolutions to move forward with closing on those loans. They've split it into 3 different loans. One will be for $1,146,000. The other will be for $8 million. And then the last one will be for $8,854,000. So the next step, you just need, council needs to formally approve these resolutions. We will then provide that to the USDA and we will schedule a closing date for those loans and we will get that project moving.
Councilman Friend.
So just a simple question, why 3 loans and not one big one?
That's how the USDA broke out the funding. That would be.
Okay.
Councilman Lee.
Yes, the loan payback. It's paid back as a bond?
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. We can go forward with the conversation. Yeah.
Any other questions on this before we get to our regular session? Right, so, I will open this up now for public comment. At this time, if there's anybody within the gallery that would like to stand and address the council, you may take the floor, come forward, give us your name, your address, and 3 minutes will begin here.
Hi, my name is Terry Ott. I live in 919 North Ionia. I'm here about the property at 310 Fitch. You brought up the fact that you can't get the property rezoned unless you own it, which I understand that. But when I did go in front of the zoning board before, I didn't own all of Michigan Ave. And got that all rezoned, mixed use. So I understand the catch-22 part, but maybe you don't have to own the property in order to get it rezoned. Because I didn't own all of Michigan Ave and got that rezoned. So that might not be that difficult to get that rezoned. And if the land bank is willing to work with that. And when I talked with Krista a year and a half ago about another property on Michigan Ave, and she informed me that that was perfectly well within his rights to purchase that property, but it was the city's right and their duty to decide what to do with it. So you can purchase the property. It's the city, so they really shouldn't be trying to tell everybody what what they can and can't do with the property, it's up to the city to just make that determination, according to her. So if the city is okay with me basically having a driveway back there, I don't want the whole thing for a parking lot. That's not what I'm looking to do. I'm not trying to make an eyesore or anything like that. A driveway for a couple of us to park into, a drop-off spot for my handicapped and elderly people. That's all I'm asking for. I will fix the rest of the lot up and make it nice. So there won't be a problem if you build on 312, you will not have an eyesore next door at 310. And that will fall underneath the city, making sure that happens. I mean, I will anyway, but you don't have to take my word for it because you guys can govern that. So anyway, thank you very much.
Anybody else like to stand and address council? On the same topic. When those houses came down.
If you can give us your name.
Oh,
and
I'm
your
sorry.
address, that's okay.
Yes, Christy Vaughn. I live at 1003 East Michigan Avenue. I'm next door to the beauty shop and on the corner of Fitch Street. So 310 is basically next to my backyard. But when these properties came down, they were first put in the side lot program. And later on, they were taken out in November of 2018. And at that time, I was told by the land bank that those lots weren't big enough. They weren't wide enough to build modern houses on. And so they wanted to join those two lots together and build and have someone build a nice big house, which would be fine. I would be very happy with a nice, big, beautiful house next door. But I have to say that I was down at City Hall recently, and Ian was kind enough to show me several of the models of these types of housing that is the plan to go in there, I understand. And I got to thinking about it later. And I don't believe these types of housing would fit in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is old, it's historic, it's all two-story houses. And I don't think a modular would be appropriate for this neighborhood. My second concern with building two modulars on each of those properties is that they don't have a buyer. And these houses are very, very small, and they come with a very big price tag. And I'm concerned that without a buyer on board, that they might have to try to recoup the grant money by turning it into rentals. We already have enough rentals on Fitch Street, and we've had several problems with those rentals. They've turned into nuisances with loud music and fighting and cars pulling in and out. And we definitely don't need any more rentals in our neighborhood. My third concern is I'm a little concerned that my property values might go down with two modulars right next door. And I would challenge our city council members to consider this. If you had an empty lot next door to your home, would you want somebody to come in and put a modular on it right next door? I understand we need housing, and but I don't think these two lots, 310 and 312, are the place for that type of housing. I picture these kinds of housing with other houses like it in an area where they're all together as a singular neighborhood. And that's all I've got. Thank you. Yep.
Hi, my name is Charles Holmes. I live at 311 West Center Street. And I got a quick question. It's like 4 or 5 properties next door to my home that I've been talking with the land bank about for a few years, and they said that Albion has them reserved for a project. So I'm wondering what project are they reserved for? Because I've been trying to buy them next to my home. So I was wondering, can you give me some insights on what kind of projects gonna be put over next to my home?
So unfortunately, during public comment, it's not like a conversation. You can ask for information and we can.
I want some information to buy them.
Well, yeah, so if we have that information, we can give it to you after.
Oh, after this?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
So-
we have the name, and if you want to get a hold of your council member, so that they can get that information to you, that would be the way to go.
okay, all right. Thank you.
What's your address?
Name.
What's your address?
Street, West.
West Central?
West.
West Centers. What's the street?
Would anybody else like to speak and address council? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Support? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Study session adjourned 6:58 PM. Be back in 2 minutes, please.
Joe. Did we see the last one?